At Sierra, discover joyous deals on great gifts for everyone on your list. Like cozy slippers, ski gear, fishing poles, bikes, large kayaks, even larger canoes. Whew, which might lead to another discovery. Wrapping gifts is the only sport you need to stay fit this season. 'Tis the season to discover great gifts at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Listening to this podcast? Smart move. Being financially savvy? Smart move. Another smart move? Having State Farm help you create a competitive price when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling, just another way to save with the personal price plan. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
Here's my 30-second story with Guinness. As soon as my sister and I get home for the holidays, we don't even unpack. We head straight to our pub. The bartender already knows our order, Guinness and fries. We laugh all night, catch up with old friends, and walk home with faces sore from smiling. It's one of my favorite nights of the year. That was my 30-second story with Guinness.
Guinness Draft Stout. Please enjoy responsibly. Imported by Diageo Beer Company, USA, New York, New York.
Hello and welcome to the Paddock and the Pavilion, live from North Runcton Cricket Club in Norfolk. Tonight my guest is Roland Butcher, the first black cricketer to play cricket for England. Welcome back to the show, Roland, live in Norfolk.
Yes, Stephen, thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me to this very wonderful part of the country.
It's a little bit different from when I'm sitting at home in my spare room. And also welcome to all our listeners on YouTube. And we'll be coming back to you later for questions. We are going to talk about your new book, Breaking Barriers, Barbados to England and Back, which is where we're going to go in this podcast. But the first question, Roland, why did you write Breaking Barriers?
Well, Stephen, I always knew that at some point in time I'd have to do autobiography. And I guess, Father Time waits for no one. So as the advancing years caught up with me, it became really clear that I needed to do that. I think it was also pushed by the author, Dr. Sasha Sutherland, who, she kept saying to me, Roland, you need to write your autobiography. And for several years, my answer would be, yeah, sure. Not really seriously thinking about it. But when I returned to Barbados last year at the end of the cricket season, I mentioned to her that, yes, I think it's about time that I would do it. And she said, great. And thought that I had organized with an author, etc. And I said, yeah, but the only thing is that you're going to do it. Of which she was surprised and shocked because having never written a book before. But I think really it was her prompting that got me thinking that it was time.
We're going to hear from Sasha later in the show. The book tells your extraordinary story from your childhood in Barbados to the pinnacle of international cricket. And it's much more than a cricket book. It talks about all the barriers you have broken.
Yeah, absolutely. We wanted to really produce something that wasn't purely about cricket and statistics, because there are enough platforms out there for you to find out what I did on the cricket field. And so we wanted to produce something that was more lasting in terms of legacy. something that people could use, to improve their own lives and their own journeys, particularly the young people, the young generation coming. So the idea really was to produce that type of work that, it would be relevant not just at this moment in time, but in the future. What's the reaction been? We're here tonight in North Runcton, and only recently you've been in New York. Yeah, this it's been quite amazing, actually. I think since I arrived back in UK around the 8th of May, I don't think my feet hasn't touched the ground. I've just been, all over the country, doing the various book launches. And yes, we just returned from the US, where we were in Connecticut and New York. I'm here tonight, and tomorrow I'm in Sheffield. I was at Bedfordshire University last night. So even though the advancing years are there, I'm still being pushed to do as much as possible. Well, you've just had a birthday, 72 on the 14th of October, and you were born in rural Barbados, 16 miles, I think, from Bridgetown. Your parents were part of the Windrush generation. You're born in 1953, and they moved to England in 1955. And you were brought up by your grandmother and your Aunt Olga. Can you let people online and the audience a bit more about your childhood? Yeah, my childhood was a very happy one. I loved being a child. I was born in East Point St. Philip, which is on the eastern tip of the island. It's a very rural area. Not a lot to do in those parts besides, if you play cricket, swim at the beach, and that's pretty much it, really, and go to school. You're a long way up from the capital, Bridgetown. Obviously, back in those days, transport was not particularly good in those areas, which was an advantage for us, really, as young boys who wanted to play the game, because, we would play cricket in the road, weekends, holidays, for hours on end without a car coming by. So that was, that was fantastic. But I enjoyed my life, certainly as a youngster growing up. And, I was very fortunate to be in a family that was very, very hardworking, had great values. We were a very poor family, but, my grandmother and aunt made up for that in many other ways. And they're really responsible for what you see here right now, actually. Just to let the audience know, before you went to school, you used to fetch the water, feed the animals, and you had to do that in the evening after school as well. Well, yeah, listen, my grandmother, God rest her soul, she was really in charge of the household. She brought up actually, 7 grandchildren at the same time, all 7. My Aunt Olga, who was her first daughter, she had 2 daughters. My father had myself and my sister Margaret. Obviously, my father was in the UK. I had an aunt, Joyce, in Canada. She had a son. And another aunt in England had 2 other children, a boy and a girl. So there were 7 grands. And I was the eldest boy. So by de facto, I was the male in the house, really. So the male had a lot of responsibilities. And one of my responsibilities was, obviously in those days, you didn't have running water in the house. You had to go to the local standpipe, which was probably about half a mile away. And obviously, before I go to school, I would have to bring the water in for the family to wash things and bathe and whatever before I go to school. And, we also had animals. So as my grandmother would say, they can't feed themselves. So, I would have to make sure that they're watered and fed. But I don't think it did me any harm. I think what that type of upbringing did really for me was to make me understand that, life is not always easy, but, you need to work hard. You need to have good values and there's a purpose to your life. So growing up as a kid was fantastic. You think those values and that hard work
has shaped your whole life.
I mean, absolutely. There's no question about that, because, if you imagine leaving a place like Barbados, which is blessed with 365 days of the year sunshine, you got lovely beaches, and then you transport 4,000 miles away to the UK, a completely different country, different culture, different food, different way of life, everything different. And, to find a way to deal with that and cope with that, come into a new family, because when I got here, I had two other brothers who were born here and two sisters. So that was a new family. Without that sort of upbringing, I would imagine that it would have been a much more difficult transition for me when I came to the UK.
Yes, you came to the UK in May 1967, moving to Stevenage. What was your initial reaction to England when you got here?
Well, it started very early, actually. Is when the door of the plane opened and I stepped onto the first steps and I started to breathe, and this white stuff was coming out of my mouth, and this was in May, mind you, which was supposed to be getting warm. I got a very rude awakening then as to what was to follow. So obviously the early, initial stages were obviously you're not really sure what to do. I mean, because you're in, as I said, you're in a very strange place. But I think the good thing for me was that, and good for children, is that children adapt to situations very well. So I was able to, adapt and fit in and then really thrive after that.
What was it like when you first went to school?
Well, I mean, that was another story. As I said, I arrived with my sister Margaret. She went to Barclays School in Stevenage with my two other brothers and two sisters were already at that school. But they didn't have any room for any more boys. So she was very lucky to go to that school and have the protection of her siblings in the environment. But I had to go to the other end of Stevenage, which wasn't easy, because it was a school that I think there were probably two other black children in the school. Not that really made a difference, but what I'm saying is it was on the complete opposite side of the school, of the town. So it was a school that really, didn't do a lot of sport. Sport was not high on the agenda. Where my sister's school, Barclays, was, they were very proud of their sports teams in all sports, and they had good records in the area. The school I went to was like, it didn't really matter. So it took a while to adjust to that situation.
Talking about sport, you've come across to England, and football was the dominant sport in England, as opposed to what you'd been used to in the Caribbean.
Yeah, that was a surprise and a shock. Coming from the Caribbean, and all you ever did was play cricket. You, as a youngster, you believe that that's all kids do. And when I arrived in UK, I found it was completely different. All kids were playing football. Nobody was playing cricket. Kids were not playing any cricket. And that seemed a little strange. I hadn't been exposed to football before that, but, I tagged along with my brothers when they were playing with their friends, and I very quickly got into playing the sport and loved playing the sport, and it became a really big part of my life after that.
Yes, you became the first black player to play football for Stevenage, but it was playing football that started your cricket career in England.
It was. As I said, the school I went to we probably played, I think, 2 games a year, if that, against local schools. And, if we had 7 players in the team, that was it. So cricket was not very much, it wasn't high on the agenda. But I got into a group of friends who, every spare moment we got, we would go to the local park and play football. And Saturdays and Sundays in particular were days that we spent hours on end just playing. You just put the jackets down and you play. A particular Sunday, we were playing at the local park and we'd been there from about 10 o'clock. This was about 1 o'clock. The normal routine was play till about 1, go home, shower, have lunch, and then watch football on the TV. That was the routine. So around 1 o'clock, we were packing up to leave, and some guys came onto the field, put up some stumps, and wandered over to our group and said, "Listen, guys, we're a few players short. Would any of you people like to play?" Of course, the reply from everyone was, "Of course not. We are cold, we are hungry, we want to go home." So that certainly was what I said. And but one of my friends, Graham Hopkins, who's still a very close friend, he said, "Listen, you're always talking to me about cricket, where you played in Barbados. Why don't you play?" And I resisted for quite a while, but he insisted. And eventually I went home, told my mother, "These guys have asked me to play. Can I play?" And she said, "Sure." So I went, played, didn't do anything fantastic, but I think I got about a dozen runs, took a couple of catches. But the surprising thing was at the end of it, the guy said, "Would you like to play next week?" So initially I thought, well, obviously they're going to be short again, so they want to make the numbers up. That happened to be Stevenage, 3rd-11. And really, that's how it moved on from there. That was my introduction back into the sport.
And in your book, you mention many people that have helped you along the way. And the people at Stevenage, Peter Allen and then Cyril Hammond made a difference to you.
Yeah, most definitely. I think also I'd like to add the Harold. Harold Woods was another gentleman who did. But Cyril Hammond was a player in the team, and I will speak to him in a moment because he was very instrumental in my development into the first class game, etc. But Peter Allen had the first task. Peter Allen was the captain. Only passed away a few months ago, obviously, God rest his soul. But really nice man. He was the captain of the team. And when I played for Stevenage initially, that was the 3rd-11. But I gravitated to the 2nd-11 and the 1st-11 very quickly. So by the time I was 15, I was playing in the 1st-11. But Peter Allen who selected me. He was hauled before the committee to explain, why he's picking a 15-year-old to play in the first team. But he was adamant that, I could do the job, and he got his way. So, so he, without him really standing up and backing me as a 15-year-old, who knows what would have happened after that. So he was very much instrumental in doing that. In terms of Cyril Hammond, now, Cyril Hammond was an all-round sports person. He's a good cricketer. He was also the owner of a football club, Biggleswade Football Club, which I eventually played football for as well. But in cricketing terms, I had a stroke of luck when he was offered a job at Gloucestershire County Cricket Club as chief fundraiser. But unknowing to me, when he went off to work for Gloucestershire, unknowing to me, he recommended me to the club as a young player that they should look at. And how he persuaded them, I will never know, because you can imagine you're employed at the club as a fundraiser, but you're recommending a player. He must have been pretty persuasive, because Gloucestershire decided, yes, we wanted to have a look, and invited me to come down to Bristol during the summer. I went to Bristol, stayed with Cyril and his family, took part in the trials. They liked what they saw, and I spent the rest of the summer there playing, and obviously the following summer. So it all started really at Gloucestershire, and that was through Cyril Hammond.
Yes, from that Stevenage match as a 13-year-old, by the time you were 17, you played a second 11 match for Gloucestershire, which quite an incredible leap. And in that opening game for Northants, a fairly famous fast bowler was on trial, I think, for Northants. That was Sarfraz.
Yeah, it's, it happened very quickly. As I said, those 2 summers at Gloucestershire really were eye-openers for me, really, because suddenly I am, in a group of players who are very good players. I was in the same team as a youth team at Gloucestershire. Jeff Howarth, the New Zealand captain, was their captain. And, Andy Stovold, David Graveney, Julian Shackleton. A lot of guys who went on to play first-class cricket. So, those 2 years were really good years for me.
You then moved eventually to Middlesex via the MCC ground staff, and your debut for Middlesex was against Yorkshire in 1974 at Middlesbrough, and you caught Richard Hutton bowled Cope naught.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, while I was at Gloucestershire for those 2 years, they felt, obviously, that I was too young to come onto the professional staff. So they sent me up to Lords to the MCC for a trial with the MCC. So the MCC had a program where they took promising young players from around the country, from the different counties. So the counties sent their top young players there. So I was there at the same time as Ian Botham, Ian Gould, and a number of other first-class players, Rodney Ontong and others. So they sent me up there for a trial. Again, MCC were quite happy with what they saw. Then offered me a contract. So I spent 2 years with the MCC Young Pros, and that's the 2 best years that I've ever spent, because that really taught me and all the others how to be a first-class cricketer, what was to come later on. So 2 years later, I was offered a contract by Middlesex, joined Middlesex in 72 and made my debut in 74. I remember that game very well. As you said, it was at the sunny seaport of Middlesbrough. And could not have played on a worse wicket. It was an absolute turner. The ball just turned for ball 1. As a youngster, obviously, I'd never seen anything like that before. But what I do remember about the game is that I know we won the game in the end. Fred Titmus got 14 wickets in the game. I think Jeff Cope got 8 or 10. He was the Yorkshire off-spinner. I was one of 3 ducks in the middle order. I think 4, 5 and 6 got ducks, which were Larry Gomes, myself and John Murray. All got ducks. But we were lucky that Norman Featherstone scored a magnificent 150. And then we bowled Yorkshire out again and had a small chase in the end, and I didn't have to bat the second innings, so I was very happy.
You're right, Middlesex won the game by 8 wickets, and for any of you in the audience wondering how Sir Geoffrey got on, he scored 24 in the first innings and 63 in the second innings for Yorkshire, and was their top scorer in each innings. Yes,
and that's the first time I got to see Geoffrey actually on the playing field. But it's a game that I won't forget, because I was so glad I didn't have to bat in the second innings.
Your captain that day was Mike Brearley, later who won the Ashes with England, and he's written a foreword in your book. How big an influence was and has been Mike Brearley in your life?
Oh, huge. I mean, I think from the moment I went to Middlesex, he was the first captain I had when I got there. He had taken over, I think, probably the year before, probably 70, 71. He still had the remnants of some of the old brigade in the team, because in my first couple of years at Middlesex, you still had the Titmus, Murray, Parfitt, John Price, and Eric Russell. By the time I made my debut, I think there was only 2 left, which was Titmuss and Murray. So Briley took over at a time when things were changing. And obviously, he obviously decided that he wanted to captain in a different way to the way it was done before, because in the past, and he would have experienced it when he arrived as a player, young players had to be seen and not heard. So when I first went there, you sat in the dressing room and Parfit and Titmuss and all the others, they did the talking and you listen. Now, Briley's, from very early on, his idea was that, he wanted all the players involved with the decision-making, including all the young players. So that suited me. And right throughout my career, that was what I was able to embrace. So he really was very influential in what he did certainly while I was there.
When you first started playing cricket, did you experience much racial prejudice against you?
In England? To be quite honest, I didn't really understand, what racial prejudice was, because, coming from the Caribbean, as I said, I was born in a very rural area, so there was no racial discrimination at all. So it was something very, very new. So I was lucky, as I said, that I came here at the age of 13 and a half. So it didn't bother me too much. I would imagine if I was born in the UK at that time, I would have been much more exposed to racism, and perhaps it would have had a different bearing on my outlook. But I was very lucky that I didn't have it in my formative years, and it never really affected me at all.
You played regularly for Middlesex 1976 onwards, and your breakthrough came in 1980 when you were selected for England in the ODI series against Australia. What did that mean to you when you were selected for England and became the first black cricketer to play for England?
Well, I think first and foremost, what it meant to me was that, to play international cricket was a fulfillment of an ambition I had as a youngster in Barbados. As a kid, I had two ambitions. Number one was to be an international cricketer. Two was to be a pilot. And so when you get selected to play, all you can think of is, you work really hard. This is what you dreamed of. This is the opportunity. It didn't occur to me that I was the first black player playing for England. It never crossed my mind at all. I was just delighted to have, reached a point in my professional career where I was about to play international cricket. So that's all I was interested in, and really focused on playing and playing well.
What was the reaction on and off the field to you being selected?
Well, it was mixed. You had lots of people who were really happy for me to be selected. So there were lots of English people who were happy, lots of West Indian people who were happy. There were some West Indians who were not happy, and there were some English who were not happy. But I think generally, most people were extremely happy for me to be given this opportunity and thought that I deserved it. But listen, in anything that you do, you're going to have people for and against. It shouldn't deter you from achieving what you want to achieve. In actual fact, I can remember a very funny story about, I received this letter from this West Indian guy, and he didn't pull any punches, he started off the letter with like, "Dear Butcher," he said, "you have now taken black people back to the days of slavery. Judas got 30 pieces of silver. How many are you getting?" I thought that was quite funny, actually. But, that's something that I've kept to this day. I've still got that letter now. So that was funny. But then I had lots of letters from the clergy and all sorts of people who, thought it was fantastic and wishing me the best of luck. At the time, I wasn't really thinking about that. I'm thinking, I just want to play, and that was it.
You certainly played well. On the 22nd of August 1980, you scored the fastest ever 50 for a debutant in an ODI, and that stood for about 40 years.
Yeah. I didn't, again, that was not on my mind. As I said, just playing and playing well. I guess I was fortunate on the day that we had a really good batting wicket at Edgbaston. We got off to an excellent start. Boycott and Gooch put on over 100 for the first wicket. Balathi was making his debut as well. We batted a long time together, Balathi and myself. We both got half centuries. But we found out later on that mine was the fastest half century by a debutant in international cricket. And, that's something I'm very proud of. And as you said, it wasn't broken until 2021 when two Indians in the same year, Ishan Kishan and can't remember the other one right now, but Ishan Kishan and Krunal Pandya, they broke it in 2021.
And this was against Dennis Lilly, Jeff Thompson, and Len Pascoe.
Yeah, I guess I can still hang on to that those were three of the fastest bowlers in the world at the time, and to score it against them, obviously was joyful, and more importantly, to beat the Australians as well.
Up another level, though, was your selection for the England tour party to go to the West Indies in 1981, and you made your Test debut on the 13th of March. I'm sure that's a day you remember.
Yeah, it's a day that I remember, and obviously to be selected for that tour was a dream again come true. Again, Ian Botham was the captain, and as I said before, we spent 2 years together as an apprentice, so it was nice to be in his team, so to speak, and he would have had a huge part in my selection as captain. In actual fact, the debut in Barbados, again, was, I guess, a stroke of luck, because that test was actually the third test of the series. And the first test was in Trinidad. Then we went to Guyana for the second test. I didn't play in the first test, but I was down to play in the second test in Guyana. But you may remember Bob Willis had got injured in Trinidad, had to return home, and his place was taken by Robin Chapman. So Robin Chapman arrived in Guyana a couple of days before the test match. Suddenly his visa was revoked because somebody whispered to the president that he had been to South Africa years before. And obviously that was still during the isolation. And his visa was revoked. Now, that's caused a lot of problems between the ECB, the Foreign Office, etc. But the upshot of that was that in the end they decided, well, if he's got to go, the whole team will go. So we moved from there to Barbados. So that's how I got the opportunity really to make my debut in Barbados, because that test match was cancelled. Yes, that day was a joyous day because, again, it was a fulfillment of a dream. Albeit, my dream all those years ago was to play for the West Indies, because that's all I knew. But here I was playing against West Indies in Barbados, the place of my birth, in front of all of my friends and schools, friends and family and wives and everyone else. So it was a great occasion. But I think the following day in the test match was really, it came home really what life is all about, when our manager, Ken Barrington, had a heart attack and died, our assistant manager. So it was, it was good to start with, but it didn't end too well.
Did you feel like a trailblazer, a pioneer, when you went out to bat in that third test match, your first?
Definitely not. I mean, you're going to face Roberts, Holding, Marshall, Garner, Croft. You don't think about being a trailblazer. Your focus is to try and keep your eye on that ball and stay in one piece. No, I didn't think anything about being a trailblazer. It was purely cricket for me. Just do the best that I could.
Well, that was hard enough when you're playing against arguably the best Test cricket side to ever play, which included Gordon Greenidge, Desmond Haynes, a good friend of yours, Viv Richards, Clive Lloyd, and the fast bowling attack for that series was Andy Roberts, Joel Garner, Michael Holding, Colin Croft and Malcolm Marshall. Well, England lost by 298 runs in that third test, your first test, and you made 17 on debut. I also read in your book that when you went out to bat on your debut, one of the spectators walked out to bat with you.
Yeah, I mean, that was, that was surprising. As I came down the Cigar Fistoba's Pavilion steps and just stepped onto the turf, suddenly this guy appeared next to me, and he walked side by side from the pavilion right out into the middle until I took guard, and then wished me well and went back to the stands to a round of applause. I wasn't sure how to take that, whether it was calming my nerves or whether it was, but it was different. He wouldn't be allowed to do that now. He wouldn't get 5 yards, but I'm not sure how often that's happened in Test cricket.
Well, England lost the series 2-0, which, considering who they were playing against, you got 2 draws in the 4 Test matches that were played, and you made your top score in the 5th Test, 32. You played 2 other one-day internationals during that series, so you came back having played 3 Tests and you'd played 3 ODIs. You then weren't selected in what was to become Botham's Ashes of 1981. How big a blow was that? Did you think you were going to get selected the next summer?
Well, listen, I've always believed that, cricket is a results game. By the last Test match, I was coming to grips with, what Test cricket was about. I did play well. I batted well in Jamaica. I said the best I batted on tour. That was the final Test. But 81, as you know, 81, lots of changes were made in 81. Both of them lost the captaincy and, there were changes within the setup. So, disappointed that, you didn't get the opportunity to play at home. But at the same time, you know the business you're in. There's no guarantees that because you play a series, you're going to play the next series. It's all about, how you do. So that was the unfortunate thing. And as you said, I mean, the end of the year, we lost the series against West Indies 2-0 at the beginning of the year, but by the end of the year, you were talking about Botham's Ashes. So it was a very successful summer.
You'd had a taste of international cricket. What drove you on then after playing for England?
Well, listen, when you reach the top, you don't want to come down. I mean, that's what it's all about. So, you work hard to get there. So you want to work hard to get back there again. So that's really all that was in my mind, that, I want to get back there again. The second time around, I want to do justice to being there. And it's a desirable place to be, you're playing international cricket.
But at county level, you won the county championship 6 times with Middlesex. You retired in 1990. How proud, looking back now, are you that you were the first of the black players to represent England?
Well, I'm extremely proud because I think what it did was certainly made people like Norman Cowens, Will Slack, Neil Williams, Devon Malcolm, Philip De Freitas, Chris Lewis, people like that. It made them feel that, hang on a minute, I've got a chance here. If I work hard and do well, I can play as well. So the fact that by me playing motivated those guys to work even harder, and then also fulfill their own dreams by playing for England as well. I'm very happy with that.
I'd just like to mention one of the quotes in your book that really sums Roland Butcher up. The thing that motivated me, I've always had disdain for people telling me I can't do something.
Yeah, I mean, that's to this day. When someone tells me I can't do something, that's a challenge for me to do it. So, I'm a person that believes that anything is possible. So the more you tell me I can't do it, is the harder that I'll try. That's just something that I have been I guess fortunate to have had from a young kid that you must always strive, to be the best that you can. Along the way, there will be people who will be doubters, and I had that right throughout my career. I mean, lots of people were saying, you'd never play first-class cricket, or you'd never play for England, you're black, and you'll never play, all that sort of stuff. But I could easily have believed that, and that would have been it. But I was never that type of person. I always believed that, these things are there, but if I want something, I've got to work for it and let the chips fall where they lie.
Before we go back to Barbados, which you did in 2004 after 37 years in England, we're now going to hear, with David's help, from your co-author of Breaking Barriers, Dr. Sasha Sutherland.
That it doesn't matter that he's the first black man to play cricket for England. Great. That has opened doors for him, but it took a lot for him to even get there. So before we even start talking about race and what that means in current society, when you go back, you think about this young boy who's left everything that he's known, traveled to this great big country. I almost think of the Great Gatsby, coming to this land of opportunity. But for him, it was, I'm just going to meet mommy and daddy. Loving cricket, getting an opportunity, making the most of the opportunity that he was given, and not so much, I've gotten this opportunity, let me make the most of it. But hey, they want me to play cricket, I'm just gonna go and play cricket. And the only thing I know to do is be the best at cricket. And so there's so much that happened, and he just at every step of the way, you see him just doing what he loved, but doing it on purpose, with purpose, trying to perfect it, doing the training long before he becomes the Roland Butcher, first black man to play cricket for England. And so I know we tried to make that the defining moment of his career, but I think this book tells us so much more than just that one point. And so it's about making a difference in other people's lives, touching people as you go along the way, making an impact, appreciating those who've sacrificed and made an impact for you, making sure you keep relationships. And it's so much more than cricket. It's a life story about how you treat people, how you make a difference in society, how you live on purpose, how you're resilient in the midst of trials and tribulations. So I think, first black man, great, but there's so much more.
Thank you there to Dr. Sasha Sutherland, the co-author of Breaking Barriers, Barbados to England and Back. And I'm sure you'd like to say a few words about Sasha.
Yeah, most definitely. First and foremost, obviously she's done a fantastic job with the book, but we go back much further than the book. This book came out in April, May this year. But I first met her when I went to university as director of sport in 2004 as a typical student, she's very keen about gender. So what I didn't know going to university was that, the females at the university, particularly female sport, was not given the credibility that it was. So she was always fighting battles. But, it was good for me because it also opened up my mind to the fact that as director of sport, I had to be director of sport for all, not just for males, and not just for cricket. So she reminded me as well that it's not just all about cricket. So she kept me grounded in the role as director of sport, and she was only a student. So we really developed a really good friendship from there, and over the years, we've worked on many projects, and whenever I've had an idea for a project, I've thought, well, this is something that she can do. And, currently, we're working on, I founded the Barbados Royals Girls Cricket Club a couple of years ago. And, just said to her, listen, this is something that you need to do. Become the chair, get all your people together and run it. And knowing that she would be able to do it. And that's what she's doing. So, Yeah, we've had a long relationship, and she's really well. She's like a daughter, second daughter. I've got one already, but she's like a second daughter.
And I know, reading the book, you improved the standard of cricket and football, and we mustn't forget that you've got a UEFA B qualified coaching qualification.
Yeah, as I said, as director of sport, I was brought to the university by Professor Sir Hilary Beckles with a very clear mandate. Professor Sir Hilary Beckles was, an academic, but he was also an excellent cricketer, because he, like myself, came to the Caribbean, came to England around the age of 13 to his parents here in Birmingham. Played at Warwickshire as a young cricketer, and at university excelled, But it was through his cricket and university that, he really made up in his mind what he wanted to do later on in life. And that came about. I'll tell the story about how that came about. At Hull University, where he was playing, Hull was playing in the final of the British University's Cricket Championship at Edgbaston. And the final fell on the same day when he had his final exams. So he chose what any good student would do. He went and played. And he got 5 wickets, was man of the match. They won the game, missed his exams. But the funny thing was that year, Hull University always had a tradition of awarding a PhD scholarship to the top student in the university. And that particular year, the principal broke the tradition. And he said, this year, I'm awarding this PhD scholarship to Hilary Beckles, because he put his university before himself. So he got to do his PhD. But I think at that point in time, it formed in his mind the idea that sport and education should be together and not separate. Because previous to that, in the Caribbean, all people who went to university, lots of players went to university who were good cricketers, but as soon as they got to university, they stopped playing the sport because the emphasis was academic. So he brought me really to the Caribbean with a very clear mandate to develop sport and education as a pair, not separate. So that really excited me, that I was going to work towards developing student athletes, which we did in 14 sports, to the point where we were eventually offering scholarships in all of those sports. So that was very interesting, and as a result, if you bring in people who are we made demands on them, in that you had to be good at your sport, but you also had to be good at your academics. And it was a case of getting them to just balance the two. Once you do that, the sport can only improve. There's no question about that. And that's exactly what happened at university. We made massive improvements in all sports, to the point where our teams dominated all the sports in Barbados, which didn't go down too well. But the point really was that Hilary Beckles had that vision that sport and education should go together, and it was hewn in Hull University.
And you stood down from that role in 2019, and since then, as you said, you're now involved with the Barbados Royals Girls Cricket Club, and you were also a West Indian selector for a couple of years. Yeah,
in 2019, obviously within the university, by a certain age, 65, you have to retire at 65. I was quite fortunate that my birthday is in October. So it meant that was the start of another academic year. So I got the opportunity to go on for another year. But at the end of that, 2019 was the time for me to step aside. And so I retired from the university. And yes, in that time, I've been a Barbados Cricket Association director, which I was for 10 years. And the West Indies selector as well. And now, currently, as I said, one of my missions is to really The Barbados Royal Girls Cricket Club is something we founded. It's the first in Barbados and surprisingly the first in the Caribbean. And it's just really an opportunity for us to just let girls play cricket. They don't have to be any standard, just come and play. Enjoy it. If they want to be better, so be it, but just enjoy the game. And it's going really well. And, I take a lot of pride in being part of that.
Well, thank you, Roland. We've now gone from Barbados to England and back, and now it's the chance for the audience and the audience online to ask you a question about your life and career, really. So really open the floor up to anyone who's got a question.
You mentioned, sir, that you came from a fairly humble background. Do you think this gave you the drive to succeed?
Well, I don't think that you have to come from a humble background to have the drive, but I think certainly where I came from, I saw my grandmother working extremely hard, being very resilient, very persistent. So I would imagine that would have certainly rubbed off on me and certainly helped myself to do, what I've done and what I continue to do. I don't think that that's the only way, because I've never believed that there's only one way to do something. But I think you can come from a very affluent background, but if you've got that motivation as well and desire, to succeed, then obviously you can do it. So it's a combination. But I think the motivational part is very, very important. If you're not motivated to do something, it doesn't matter where you come from. You won't do it.
I think you said you were 13 when you came to this country. Is that right?
And a half, yeah.
So you had quite a long, all your childhood in the West Indies. Were there some qualms at all about playing against the West Indies when you had your first international cap, or didn't that enter the equation?
None, didn't enter the equation at all, because I'd been in England for a number of years. I was married, had children. England was my home, so it did not matter to me who I was playing against. So that first game and the other games against West Indies was just another game.
I have got one that was sent in by Richard Merriman, who played cricket for Cambridgeshire and Dorset. He was also the captain of the England over 60s team at one time. And he asked me to ask you, of the West Indies attack, who was the quickest, who was the hardest to pick up, and who was the most difficult to read?
That's an interesting one. I think West Indies were lucky and blessed with not just 5 fast bowlers, but they're all different type of fast bowlers. I think the most awkward one to play was Colin Croft because of his unusual action. And, he bowled with a very open chest, which gave the impression that ball would always be coming into the right-handed batsman, but he had the uncanny ability to get the ball to go away from the right-handed batsman, so he was perhaps the most difficult. Michael Holding was, I think, the quickest. He was just extremely fast, but perhaps the easiest to play because he has such a good action that you saw the ball early. So, he was the quickest. The two most skillful bowlers would have been Marshall and Andy Roberts. Andy Roberts was fast, but very clever as well. Malcolm Marshall was very analytical as a fast bowler. He worked out batsmen's techniques very quickly. And, he quite often he would telegraph to the rest of the team who was going to get a batsman out because he just really read the game so well. Joel Garner was perhaps the meanest of them all. When I say meanest, in that he was one of those bowlers didn't like runs being scored off him. He prided himself on being very accurate. And a guy 6'7" tall, and bowling from that height. He was really difficult. So they were all very different, but they all had something different about them. But Croft was the most difficult to play, because he had that ability.
Well, thank you for the questions, and a few more thank yous. Jim Major for putting on tonight's show. Thank North Runcton Cricket Club and all of you for coming. A special thanks also to David and Emma of DMJ Imagery. Finally, Roland, breaking barriers, Barbados to England and back. What would you say are the key messages you wanted to put across in this book?
Yeah, as I said, it's not just a cricket book. There are cricket stories, there are stats in there, but that's not the full focus of the book. I think it is, I want this book to be really a literacy and educational tool for future generations to learn about breaking their own barriers and some of the methods used to do that. Everyone will have barriers to break. So this book, as I said, it is really something for the future. It is not just for the cricket lover. The cricket lovers will buy it and they will enjoy it because there are cricketing things in there as well. But I think there's a much wider story in this book for anyone who wants to, certainly young people, the young generation. Those are the people I really trying to influence with this book. That they've got a journey to go on now. I've been on that journey, so if this book can help them to get to the end of that journey, then I'm happy.
And you can find this book in any good bookstore and also, of course, on Amazon. But before you go, I want to take you back to the 19th of May, 1991. You played, as I can find, one game in Norfolk, and that was for Suffolk. I've got to get the pronunciation right, and it's Paddock. And you got 19, but Norfolk won by 9 wickets. Can you remember the day?
Definitely not. Why would I want to remember that? No, seriously, yes. In 1991, I played a season for Suffolk. It was my first year out of first-class cricket. And I enjoyed, actually, that year. But at the end of the year, I realized that, it was time for me really to forget about playing at a serious level. But it was an interesting year and I enjoyed it, and always enjoy coming up this part of the world. Always well looked after. But I did not want to remember that game against Norfolk, for sure.
Well, thank you again, Roland, for joining me on the Paddock and the Pavilion live from Norfolk. And I'll be speaking to you again very soon. Thank you.
Pleasure.
podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Doug. Here we have the Limu Emu in its natural habitat, helping people customize their car insurance and save hundreds with Liberty Mutual. Fascinating. It's accompanied by his natural ally, Doug.
Limu? Is that guy with the binoculars watching us?
Cut the camera. They see us.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Savings vary. Underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates. Excludes Massachusetts.